Dust hung in the air like old regret. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the chapel steeple, painting the world in rust and sorrow. Emmett Callahan stood on the edge of the mercantile porch, hat tugged low, boots planted like he'd grown out of the wood. He'd only come for nails and chewing tobacco, but what he got was a girl too small to belong in this hard world, and a woman who looked like she hadn't slept since shame first set her heart on fire. The little girl stepped forward, bare feet dusted white, hair the color of wheat left too long in the sun. She clutched a faded baby doll to her chest, the seams split open, cotton stuffing peeking through like open wounds. Her voice barely reached him. "Can you buy us, mister?" Emmett's jaw shifted slow. Behind her, a young woman leaned against the post, dress torn at the hem, cheeks hollow, gaze stubbornly fixed on the horizon. She didn't look up, didn't blink. But he knew her face. Clara Lynn Holt. He'd seen that face once before. 2 weeks back, stepping off the stagecoach with dust on her boots and disdain in her eyes. She hadn't said much then, just handed over a letter with trembling fingers and a voice that refused to crack. "She won't be coming," it read, scrawled in her sister's hurried hand. Asterisk. "I've sent Clara instead." Asterisk. Clara had taken one look at Emmett, his thick waist, wind-burned skin, worn flannel stretched too tight across his shoulders, and climbed back on that coach before the wheels cooled. She'd left without a word. Until now. He didn't say anything, just watched the girl's knees wobble and her hand reach backward for the woman's dress. Clara gently touched the child's head. The girl sagged, comforted. No family resemblance, but something deeper, like two ghosts bound to the same unfinished grief. He shifted his tobacco tin to his left hand. "That your daughter?" Clara's voice was barely a breath. "My niece. You're the sister." She nodded once, tight as a wound. The preacher's wife passed by, tugging her skirts aside like the dust might climb. Her lips pinched, eyes flicking to Clara, then Emmett, then back again. Judging. Measuring. The town was small, its whispers loud. News carried faster than wildfire. The fat rancher had been stood up by his bride, and now here she was, back with a child and no ring. The girl coughed, small and sharp. Clara winced, curling a hand around her. "We'll go," she said. Didn't mean to bother. But Emmett didn't move. Something about the way Clara held herself, like someone used to breaking but not asking to be mended, kept him rooted. She was proud, but the kind of pride that had been dug out of suffering, not vanity. Her dress had once been fine, satin, maybe, now dulled by dust and patched with fabric that didn't match. The soles of her shoes were worn clean through. "How long you been in town?" he asked. 3 nights. She didn't look at him. "We sleep behind the chapel." The girl's cough came again, deeper this time. A wet rattle. "You see the doctor?" Didn't have coin. Of course she didn't. The letter had said Lavinia ran off with a drummer from Abilene, leaving Clara to clean up the mess. Probably thought she could flirt her way back into favor. But there was no charm in fever, no saving grace in a dry cough or sunburned feet. Emmett glanced at the sky. Rosie, if that was her name, wouldn't make it through another cold night behind the chapel. "Come on," he said. Clara's head snapped up. "Where?" "My place. Just for the girl." She studied him with the suspicion of someone who'd been promised too many things and delivered none. Her lips pressed together. But Rosie whimpered, and Clara's spine softened just enough to nod. They rode in silence. Rosie rested in Clara's arms, too weak to protest the sway of the saddle. Emmett didn't offer his coat. Clara didn't ask. At the ranch, he opened the door and let them pass. The house was plain, wood walls, iron stove, one cot by the hearth, a loft with hay-stuffed bedding overhead. She climbed the ladder slow, careful not to jostle Rosie. He lit the lantern and ladled stew from the pot he'd left simmering. She didn't touch it, just watched the flickering flame as she whispered into the child's hair. When he rose to stoke the fire, he left a blanket folded on the steps. By morning, it was wrapped around the girl. The days blurred. Clara stayed quiet, did the washing without being asked. Her hands were soft at first, but soon red, raw, blistered. Rosie slept in the big bed now. Emmett had moved to the floor. Clara never asked for more than bread or a moment of stillness. In town, the glares came thick and fast. Sheriff Daggs muttered around his pipe. Funny thing that. Thought she ran off with her tail between her legs. Mrs. Beatty Sloan stacked cans a little too hard behind the counter. Some girls just can't keep their shame to themselves. Emmett said nothing. He only nodded, paid, and left. Back at the ranch, Clara sat mending a shirt by the window. She didn't notice him watching. Her brow was furrowed, lips moving in soundless concentration. A button rolled across the table. She reached for it and froze when he stepped inside. I didn't plan on staying, she said softly. Thought someone would take us in for a night or two. He nodded. I didn't come back for you. I figured. A long silence. Outside, wind scraped dry leaves along the porch. I hated you when I first saw you, she confessed. You look like everything I was raised to avoid. He glanced down at his gut. And now, you look like someone who don't lie. That night, she cried again, but quieter. She thought he couldn't hear. He fixed the broken loft ladder, hauled water in without complaint, let her use the quilt his wife once sewed before the fire took everything but his bones. Clara touched it reverently, said nothing. One evening, he called her Lavinia by mistake. She dropped a bowl. It shattered on the floor. I'm not her, she said. I didn't ask for this. He stared at the pieces. Didn't think you'd come back. Neither did I. She picked up the shards one by one, hands trembling. He knelt beside her, reached for the final piece. Their fingers touched, barely, and then fell away. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, soft and far. He stood, wiped his hand on his trousers. Storm's coming. Clara didn't answer. She just looked up, eyes red, breath thin. But for the first time since her arrival, she didn't look like she wanted to run. And in the loft, Rosie coughed, hard and sudden, then cried out, sharp and terrified. Clara's body bolted to standing, but Emmett was already moving. The wind had a cruel tongue that summer. It whispered through broken fences and dry grass, dragging smoke from the hills like a warning. Emmett watched the line of fire in the distance, thin as thread, but curling toward the wheat fields with hunger. He'd seen this kind of burn before, slow, patient, then sudden, the kind that didn't ask permission. Inside, Clara sat by the window with Rosie asleep in her lap. A patch of light stretched across both their faces. She hummed without melody, just a rhythm to keep her hand steady as she stitched the shoulder of Emmett's old shirt. The thread knotted. She cursed softly, then sighed and rested her forehead against the wood. Her hands had changed. What had once been soft and unworked now bore red grooves and flaking skin. But her eyes had softened too, less steel, more sorrow. Emmett stepped inside, smoke following him. Winds shifting. We'll have to watch the line. She didn't ask what that meant, just nodded and shifted Rosie onto the cot, tucking the doll beside her. Then she went to the well without a word and began filling buckets. That night, they stood in silence watching the horizon glow. Neither spoke of fear, just the bucket line drawn across the yard, the wet blankets nailed to the eaves, the tools sharpened. Rosie woke coughing again, but weaker now, like her body was choosing to fight. Clara sat beside her, hand on her back, eyes never blinking. At dawn, the fire veered north. The house stood. By the third day, Clara let herself breathe. She found Emmett splitting wood behind the barn, his shirt soaked through. She brought him water. He drank it and handed her the cup like she'd always belonged there. You can leave if you want, he said, not unkindly. She looked at the barn, the loft, the place where Rosie had slept without fever for the first time in weeks. I don't want to, she said. And then came the sound of hooves. The carriage bore a red trim, chipped and worn. The woman who stepped down wore her hair pinned and her pride tighter. Lavinia Holt, slimmer than before, cheeks hollowed by regret or hunger. It was hard to tell. Her eyes scanned the yard until they landed on Clara, then narrowed. I came for my child. Clara's body stiffened. Emmett moved between them before he even realized it. She's not yours anymore, he said. She's mine by blood, Lavinia spat. You think that makes you her father? She don't even call you Mama. Clara didn't speak. She picked Rosie up from the cot and carried her inside. Rosie blinked at the sudden light, her small arms curling around Clara's neck. Lavinia stepped forward. You think just because I gave you one letter, you can take everything? I saved you. I gave you a man, a house. What did you ever have before I handed him to you? Clara's voice came through the open window, steady but low. You gave me shame. You gave me nothing else. The air rippled with tension. Emmett saw it before it happened. Lavinia stepping toward the door like she could undo what months had mended. She pushed inside. Clara stood at the table, Rosie behind her, the doll clutched to her chest. I'll call the sheriff, Clara warned. Lavinia scoffed. You think anyone will believe you over me? You're just the spare sister. Always were. Clara didn't flinch. You abandoned her. I held her fever. I sang her to sleep. She loves me. Rosie's voice was quiet. Don't let her take me. Lavinia's face froze. You don't mean that. But Rosie was already hiding behind Clara's skirt, eyes wide with fear. Emmett stepped into the house. I said no. Lavinia spun on him. You don't know her like I do. She plays weak, makes you feel sorry. But she'll leave you too. I know what she's done, he said. And I know what you didn't. Lavinia's shoulders sagged just a bit. Her eyes flicked to Rosie, then to Clara, then away, toward the horizon, where smoke still lingered. Her voice lost its bite. You think this ends with you two playing house? She'll use you up. Clara stepped forward. Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake. You had your choice. You rode off for your own name. I stayed. That's the only difference between us. Outside, the sound of hooves again. Sheriff Daggs rode up slow, eyeing the scene like he already knew which way the wind was blowing. He tipped his hat at Lavinia. Miss Holt, didn't expect to see you again. I want my child, Lavinia said. The sheriff shrugged. She ain't your child no more, far as I'm concerned. You left her in a town with no food and no name. She's mine. She's safe, the sheriff said simply. That's better than most. Lavinia stood there, shoulders heaving with the weight of her own absence. Then she turned, stepped off the porch, and rode away without looking back. Inside, the silence settled thick. Clara sank to the floor and held Rosie tight. The child's breathing was steady now, her small fingers twining into Clara's braid. Emmett stood in the doorway, watching like a man on the edge of something too big to name. I'm not asking to be your wife, Clara said, without looking up. I'm not asking either, he replied. She finally raised her head. Then what are we? He thought for a long time. Maybe we're just two people who didn't leave. That night, she made bread for the first time in the house. It came out flat and too hard. He ate every bite. Rosie laughed again, light and unafraid, chasing chickens that didn't like being chased. Clara hung sheets on the line and let the wind carry her hair. When Emmett passed, he reached out and tucked a stray lock behind her ear. She didn't pull away. Weeks passed. A quiet settled over the ranch. Not the silence of grief, but the kind that grew when no one was waiting to be disappointed. Clara began humming again while she worked. Emmett started whistling while he fixed the gate. Rosie named every goat on the property. One afternoon, Clara found a bolt of pale blue cloth folded on the kitchen table. No note, just the gift. She ran her fingers over it, and her lips parted like she might cry or laugh, but did neither. When Emmett came in for supper, she looked up and said, You still got that old quilt from before? He nodded. She touched the cloth gently. I think I'll make one for her. He didn't answer, just pulled out a chair and sat down. Outside, the sky turned gold with evening, the fields humming softly in the breeze. Inside, the lamp flickered, Rosie snored in the loft, and Clara stitched in silence. The wind picked up again. In the morning, the blue cloth was gone from the table, but a tiny shirt hung drying on the line.